What if your closest ally turned their back on you overnight? Why did Canada abandon the US for billion-dollar gas deals with Asia, eager to unravel more gripping true mysteries? Hit like and subscribe to explore haunting historical accounts with us. It's a bone-chilling dawn in Kitimat, British Columbia. February 2025. A thick fog blankets the Douglas Channel, where the gaslog Glasgow, a massive LNG tanker, slices through the mist like a specter. Its cargo, Canada's first major shipment of liquefied natural gas, bound not for the US, but for South Korea. Picture the scene: waves lapping against the hull, the air heavy with the scent of salt and diesel, and a question that hangs like the fog itself. Why would Canada, America's loyal partner for over a century, pivot to Asia with billions on the line? What secrets drove this betrayal? I stumbled across this story in early 2025, scrolling through heated posts on X about Canada's trade treason. It hit me like a gut punch. A nation I'd always seen as the US's quieter sibling was rewriting the rules of global energy. The more I dug, the more it felt like a mystery novel, with hidden motives and high stakes. Let's unravel this tale, step by step, and trust me, it's not just about gas, it's about trust, power, and a world teetering on the edge. To understand this betrayal, we need to go back. For decades, Canada and the US were inseparable, their economies intertwined like roots under shared soil. Picture the sprawling oil sands of Alberta, where pumps have churned out crude since the 1960s, sending 24% of America's oil and nearly all of Canada's exports south. Natural gas flowed, too, through pipelines like lifelines, fueling Midwest refineries built specifically for Canada's heavy crude. The North American Free Trade Agreement, later the USMCA in 2018, locked in this partnership. Canada wasn't just a supplier. It was the backbone of U.S. energy security. Imagine standing on the border in Montana, 2020, watching a pipeline crew weld steel under an endless sky. You'd feel the weight of mutual reliance. Canada needed the U.S. market, and the U.S. needed Canada's resources. By 2024, Canada supplied 90% of US electricity imports and 4 million barrels of oil daily. It was a marriage of necessity, built on geography and trust. But marriages crack when one partner takes the other for granted. Enter Donald Trump's second term in January 2025. His Liberation Day speech on April 2nd sent shockwaves, announcing 25% tariffs on Canada, Japan, and South Korea, with a deadline to renegotiate trade terms by August 1st. The US wanted cheaper oil, more control. To Canada, it felt like a knife in the back. I can't help but wonder, how do you stay loyal when your biggest ally threatens to choke your economy? Would you bow or fight back? Canada's pivot didn't happen overnight. The roots trace back to 2014, when the LNG Canada project in Kitimat was approved, a $35 billion bet to break free from U.S. dependence, backed by Shell, PetroChina, Mitsubishi, and South Korea's Kogas. It aimed to ship 14 million tons of liquefied natural gas annually to Asia. Picture the rugged coast of British Columbia, where the Coastal GasLink pipeline snakes 400 miles through forests and mountains to feed the Kitimat terminal. It was a bold vision, but fraught with ghosts. The Wet'suwet'en and First Nation stood divided. Elected leaders signed agreements, seeing jobs and revenue. But hereditary chiefs blockaded roads in 2021, arguing the pipeline trampled their rights. Protests flared, arrests followed, and fines hit $1.4 million for environmental violations, like erosion and sediment leaks. Methane emissions, a dirty secret of LNG, drew fire from climate activists. Yet Canada pushed forward, haunted by a bigger fear, being tethered to an unpredictable US-Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine lit a fuse. Europe, desperate for non-Russian gas, begged Canada to step up. But the real jolt came in 2025, when Trump's tariffs landed like a sledgehammer. Energy economist Kent Fellows, nailed it. Trump's disdain for trade agreements made allies skeptical of long-term U.S. deals. Canada had to diversify, and Asia ravenous for energy was the answer. Imagine being a Canadian official, staring at tariff threats, knowing your economy hangs by a thread. Would you double down on the U.S. or roll the dice on new partners? By February 2025, the gas-logged Glasgow was steaming toward South Korea, a floating symbol of Canada's new path. Japan, South Korea, and China weren't just customers, they were investors. Mitsubishi held a 15% stake in LNG Canada, PetroChina, another 15%, and Koga's 5%. These were deep ties, forged over years. Asia needed gas to replace coal, curb emissions, and fuel booming economies. Canada offered stability, shorter shipping routes than the U.S. Gulf Coast, no Panama Canal bottlenecks, and a government less likely to slap surprise tariffs. Picture a tense meeting in Tokyo, February 2025. Alberta's Minister Rebecca Schultz stands before JERA, Japan's largest LNG buyer, her voice steady but urgent. Canada's gas is your security, she says, highlighting 12-day Pacific crossings, versus 20 days from the U.S.-Japan, stung by Trump's tariffs, listens. South Korea, facing similar pressure, signs a 10-year deal for 2 million tons annually. China, hit with 145% U.S. tariffs, quietly ramps up talks for Canadian oil and gas. Here's where the mystery deepens. Why the secrecy? Posts on X buzzed with rumors of backroom deals, meetings in Seoul and Beijing that Canada kept under wraps. I remember reading one post claiming Carney met Chinese officials off the record, but no one could confirm it. Was it just economics? Or did Canada hold a grudge? Prime Minister Mark Carney called LNG Canada a turning point for trade, but his guarded tone left me uneasy. What wasn't he telling the world? Across the border, the U.S. felt the burn. Midwest refineries, engineered for Canada's heavy crude, faced a nightmare. Retool or turn to unstable suppliers like Venezuela or Saudi Arabia. Trump roared at Davos, "We don't need Canada's oil or gas. We have more than anybody." He pushed Alaska's $40 billion LNG project as a rival, but it was years behind Kitimat. Canada's exit wasn't just a business move, it was a gut punch. The U.S. lost 24% of its oil imports and a chunk of its gas overnight. Step into the shoes of a refinery worker in Ohio. March 2025. Your plant's humming, but rumors swirl Canada's. Gas is going to Asia. Your job, your town, feels shakier by the day. I can't help but feel for those workers. Canada's move was legal, even logical, but it felt personal. The U.S. had leaned on Canada for decades, assuming loyalty was a given. Now, that trust was shattered, and the Midwest bore the scars. Canada's pivot wasn't flawless. LNG Canada faced relentless scrutiny. Environmentalists flagged methane leaks, which warm the planet 80 times faster than CO2 in the short term. British Columbia hit Coastal GasLink with $1.4 million in fines for sloppy construction, erosion, and sediment-choked streams, threatening salmon habitats. The Wet'suwet'en end protests lingered, their hereditary chiefs calling the pipeline a curse on their land. One elder's words stuck with me. "This gas carries our pain across the ocean." Imagine their frustration, economic promises clashing with cultural loss. Then there's the climate gamble. Shell claimed LNG would displace coal in Asia, cutting emissions, but experts like Mark Jackard argued the math was fuzzy. Liquefying and shipping gas leaks methane at every step, and Asia's coal plants weren't shutting down fast enough. With 6 more LNG plants in Canada's pipeline, the nation was doubling down on fossil fuels as renewables gained steam. I keep thinking, is this progress or a deal with the devil? By July 2025, the world was a chessboard, and Canada was making bold moves. Japan and South Korea, reeling from U.S. tariffs, held a rare economic summit in Seoul, floating a free trade pact to counter Trump's trade war. China, battered by 145% tariffs, leaned harder on Canada, buying 8.24 million barrels of oil via the Trans Mountain Pipeline in 2024 alone. Canada wasn't just a supplier, it was a linchpin in a new Asian alliance. Think about it, a nation of 40 million outplaying the US in global trade. It's almost surreal, but shadows lingered. Trump pushed Japan and South Korea to fund Alaska's LNG project, a $40 billion counterpunch to Kitimat. Posts on X speculated about US-pressured diplomatic arm-twisting to pull Asia back. Did Canada move first to outmaneuver Trump, or were they forced into a corner? I can't shake the feeling. There's a piece of this puzzle we're missing, like a classified memo buried in Ottawa. The Haisla First Nation, part owners of a related LNG project, celebrated economic wins, jobs, infrastructure, a stake in the future. But their chief, Crystal Smith, admitted the cost. We've healed some wounds, but others run deep. This wasn't just about gas. It was about rewriting Canada's identity, from America's shadow to Asia's partner. As the Gaslog Glasgow docked in South Korea, Canada stood at a precipice. LNG Canada's first phase would ship 14 million tons a year, with plans to double by 2030. Alberta inked new deals with Japan, and China's oil purchases soared 66% of Trans Mountain's capacity went to Asia by mid-2025. The US was no longer Canada's anchor, and the shift felt final. But here's the question that keeps me up at night. Was this betrayal Canada's choice, or America's fault? Trump's tariffs, his annexation, threats. He mused about annexing Canada in a 2025 tweet, pushed Ottawa to act. Yet Canada's speed, the secrecy, the sheer scale of the pivot, feels like more than self-defense. I think of those Kitimat workers, watching tankers sail to Asia, knowing their future hinges on distant markets. Then I think of us refiners, blindsided by a partner they thought they knew, who betrayed who first. This story isn't just about pipelines or trade wars. It's about what happens when trust erodes between allies. Canada's gas pivot was a masterstroke, but it came with ghosts, environmental scars, indigenous pain, and a fractured North American bond. Imagine being Mark Carney, facing Trump's threats, knowing one wrong move could tank your economy. Would you have gambled on Asia, knowing the fallout? For me, this saga cuts deep because it's a reminder. Even the strongest alliances can crumble. Canada didn't just sell gas. It sold a new vision of itself, one that left the US in the dust. But as those tankers vanish into the Pacific fog, a truth lingers. Betrayal leaves no winners, only echoes. Canada's gas may power Asia, but the ghost of its broken trust with America will haunt the border for years to come. Are you captivated by this unsettling story? Let us know your location and time in the comments. We'd love to know where and when you're watching from. Keep chasing the unknown.